He signed the papers on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just gotten back from my book club, the one I had been going to every second Tuesday of the month for 11 years. I walked in through the side door, the one that sticks a little in humid weather, and I set my keys on the hook by the refrigerator, the way I always do. My son-in-law was sitting at the kitchen table with a pen in his hand and a stack of papers in front of him, and my daughter was standing behind him with her hand on his shoulder, and neither of them looked up when I came in. I said hello. Neither of them answered. I set my purse down on the counter and I asked what they were working on. My daughter, I will call her my daughter because that is what she is. That is what she will always be. No matter what, she finally looked up. She smiled at me. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that means the person smiling has already decided something, and they are not going to tell you what it is yet. She said, "Oh, nothing for you to worry about, Mom." That was the first thing that told me I should be very worried indeed. I want to go back a little, because you need to understand how we got there. Not for my sake, for yours. Because I have a feeling some of you know exactly what the beginning of this kind of story looks like. It looks completely normal. That is the thing nobody warns you about. My name is Sylvia. I am 67 years old. I spent 32 years as a registered nurse at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I raised 2 children, mostly on my own after my husband Gerald passed from a heart attack when our daughter was 9 and our son was 12. I bought my house in 1998. I paid it off in 2017. I have a small pension, a Social Security check that comes on the 3rd of every month, and a savings account I have been quietly adding to since my kids were in elementary school. I did not tell my daughter about the savings account. Not the real one. Not all of it. That matters. I will get back to that. My daughter is 41. Her husband, I will call him my son-in-law, is 44. They have 1 child together, a boy who just turned 6. For 3 years, they lived in an apartment in the same city as me, and things were fine, not perfect. My son-in-law has a way of making you feel like a guest in your own life, but fine. We had Sunday dinners. I watched my grandson on Thursday afternoons. My daughter called me most evenings, usually to talk about something small, a recipe she tried or something funny the boy did at preschool. Then her husband lost his job. He was in sales, mid-level management at a tech company, the kind of company that does layoffs every 18 months and calls it restructuring. He was there for 6 years, and then one Thursday, he was not there anymore. He came home with a cardboard box and a face like a storm cloud, and he sat in their apartment for 2 weeks without showering regularly. And my daughter called me every night, her voice low, and I could hear the fear in it. I said, "Come stay with me, just for a while, until he gets back on his feet. I have the space." My son is in Portland now, has been for 8 years, married with 2 daughters of his own. My house has 3 bedrooms. I was rattling around in it by myself. I said, "Come." It makes sense. My daughter cried on the phone. She said, "Mom, you are the most generous person I know." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Of course I am sure." She said she would ask her husband. She called me back within the hour and said they would love to. That was 22 months ago. The first 3 months were good, genuinely good. My grandson was underfoot constantly, and it made the house feel alive in a way it had not in years. My daughter cooked sometimes. Her husband was polite at dinner, a little quiet, but polite. He went out for job interviews and came back, and I asked how it went, and he said fine, and I did not push. I covered the groceries. I said I would, and I did. I covered the utilities too because they were living there, and I did not think it was right to split things when they had no income. My daughter offered to pay rent once, and I waved it off. She was my child. That was not what this was about. By month 4, I noticed I was also covering their cell phone bills. I did not remember agreeing to that. It happened slowly. the way a tide comes in. Their plan got added to mine when they moved in, just for simplicity. And then no one ever brought up changing it back. By month 6, I was buying my grandson's school supplies, his shoes, his winter coat. My daughter thanked me every time. Her husband said nothing. By month 9, I was covering their car insurance. I did the math one evening in September, sitting at the kitchen table after everyone was in bed. I got out a notepad and I wrote down every regular expense I was covering that had not been mine before they moved in. Groceries for 4 instead of 1. A family cell plan. Car insurance for 2 additional drivers. My grandson's clothing, school fees, after-school snacks, a birthday party I hosted for 8 6-year-olds in my backyard. Little things that were not little when you added them up. I was spending an additional $1,900 a month. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I folded up the notepad and put it in the drawer next to the crossword puzzle books, and I told myself it was family. Family helps. That is what I had always believed. I still believe it. But I want you to understand the number. $1,900 a month. For 9 months, on a pension and Social Security. I had the savings account. I had started pulling from it. Not much. Just to smooth things over. The job search stretched out. 6 months became a year. My son-in-law had interviews that led nowhere, or so he said. I did not know what happened in those interviews. He did not share. He spent a lot of time in the living room watching television and a lot of time on his phone. And when I walked through, he looked up with the expression of a man who was waiting for someone to bother him. My daughter started to change around that time. Or maybe I started to notice what had always been there. She got quieter with me, more guarded. I would ask her something simple. How was the dentist appointment? Did you hear back about that job application? And she would answer in short sentences and look toward wherever her husband was in the house, like she was checking something. One evening in November, I made chicken and dumplings, which has been my recipe since before my daughter was born, and I set the table and called everyone for dinner. My son-in-law came in and looked at the pot and said he was not really hungry. My daughter looked at me and then looked at him and said, "Actually, maybe we should just get something for ourselves tonight." She got up and ordered delivery on her phone. I sat at the table alone with the chicken and dumplings. I ate a bowl. It was very quiet. I did not say anything that night. I am not a person who makes scenes. But I sat at that table for a long time after the food was cold, and I thought about what Gerald would have said. Gerald would have said, "Sylvia, you see what is happening. You see it clearly. The question is what you are going to do about it." I called my bank the following Monday, not to do anything. Just to look. My savings account, the main one, the one connected to my checking, the one my daughter knew about, had gone down considerably. More than I had realized, honestly. I had been contributing to the household without keeping exact track, and the number in the account was smaller than I wanted it to be. Not alarming, but smaller. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and I thought, I have a second account. I opened it in 2009 after my mother passed and left me a small inheritance. I put it in its own account at a different bank, quietly, not because I was hiding anything from anyone in particular, but because I had watched my mother spend her whole life putting everyone else first and then have nothing at the end, and I told myself that would not happen to me. I call it my quiet account. No one knows about it. Not my daughter, not my son, not anyone. I looked at my quiet account on my phone that afternoon. It was intact. It had been growing slowly for 15 years. I sat with that information for a while. Then I drove home. Things got worse faster than I expected after Christmas. My son-in-law got a job offer in February. It was not a perfect offer. Less than he had been making before, different industry. But it was a real job with a salary and benefits. I found out, because I overheard them talking about it in the hallway. My daughter's voice was low and urgent. She was saying, "It is a good offer. It is a real salary. We should take it." His voice was flat. He said it was beneath him. He said he was not going to start over at that level. He said he expected better by now. My daughter said, "We have been living with my mother for 14 months. He said, "Yes, and she is not complaining, is she?" I stood very still on the other side of the wall. He did not take the job. In March, my daughter asked me if I could put her name on my checking account. She said it was just for convenience, in case of an emergency, so she could help me manage things if something happened to me. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I told her I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I called my bank and added her as an authorized signer on my checking account. Not on the quiet account, just the main one, the one that was running lower than I liked. That was my mistake. I knew it was a mistake approximately 48 hours after I made it. My daughter started managing my finances. That is the soft way to say it. The accurate way to say it is that she started moving money without asking me. Not large amounts at first. A few hundred here, transferred to her own account, which she explained as reimbursement for groceries she had bought. Then a car repair I did not know about until I saw the charge. Then something she described as an investment opportunity her husband had found, just $1,500 just to see. I found out about the investment when I looked at my statement in April. $1,500 gone to an account I did not recognize. I asked my daughter about it at breakfast. She said, "Oh, that was for the opportunity I mentioned. Remember I told you?" I said I did not remember her mentioning it. She said, "Mom, I definitely told you. You must have forgotten." I had not forgotten. But I did not argue. I wrote it down on a new notepad that I kept in my bedroom, in the drawer of my nightstand where no one would look. I wrote down every transfer I found, every amount, every date. I went back through 12 months of statements, and I wrote it all down. When I was finished, the number at the bottom of the last page was not a number I expected. I closed the notepad, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I breathed. Just breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way I used to tell patients to do when something was too much to take in all at once. In May, my son-in-law came home with papers. I know now that the papers were a quitclaim deed. At the time, I did not fully understand what I was looking at. He set them on the kitchen table after dinner, and he said, "We have been thinking, and this house is really too large for just you, and it would make more sense for you to sign over a co-ownership interest so that there are no complications if anything happens to you." He said it like he was discussing the weather. He said it would really be for your protection. I asked him who prepared the documents. He said a friend of his, someone who worked in real estate law. I said I would need to have my own attorney look at it. My son-in-law looked at me, just looked at me, for a moment without blinking. Then he smiled. He said, "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." My daughter was quiet through this whole exchange. She did not look at me. That night I called my son in Portland, not to ask him anything, just to hear his voice. He asked me how things were going, and I said, "Fine, everything is fine." We talked for 20 minutes about his daughters and his garden, and whether the Timbers had a chance this season. After we hung up, I sat in the dark in my bedroom for a long time. I did not sign the papers. I made an appointment with a real estate attorney named Thomas, who had an office on the other side of town, and I drove there on a Wednesday morning and said I had not mentioned this appointment to anyone, and I needed his honest assessment of what I was being asked to sign. He read through the documents. He asked me some questions. Then he put them down on his desk and he folded his hands. And he said, "Mrs. Sylvia, if you sign this, you will be giving up sole ownership of your home. You will not be able to sell it, refinance it, or make any major decisions about it without the co-owner's agreement." He said, "Are you certain this is what you want to do?" I said no. I said I was not certain at all. He said, "Then do not sign it." I drove home and I put the papers in a folder in my filing cabinet and I said nothing to anyone. 2 weeks later, my daughter asked me if I had made a decision. I said I was still thinking. She said, "Mom, it would really simplify things." I said, "I understand. I am still thinking." She looked at me with something in her eyes that I had not seen there before. Something impatient. Something assessing. I recognized it. I had seen it in her father's eyes once or twice toward the end. It was the look of someone recalculating. The morning everything changed was the last Thursday in June. I had been at my neighbor's house the previous evening. Her name is Frances. She has been my neighbor for 20 years, and she is one of the sharpest people I have ever known. And I stayed later than I intended. And when I came home, the house was dark, and I went to bed without checking my phone. In the morning, I checked my checking account. There was a transfer. $4,000 moved out of my account into one I did not recognize. Not my daughter's regular account, a different one. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and I was very still. My daughter came downstairs in her robe and she poured herself coffee and she sat down across from me and she looked at me the way you look at a problem you have mostly figured out. She said, "We had been talking, and we think it would be a good idea for you to start thinking about what comes next." She said, "You are getting older, and managing finances can be complicated, and it might be time to let us take over more of that." She said, "We want what is best for you." I said I saw the transfer. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "That was a household expense. I will explain it later." I said, $4,000 is not a household expense. She said, "Mom." She said my name the way you say a name when you are done discussing something. She leaned forward a little, and she looked me in the eye and she said, "You are not getting any younger. You need us here. And honestly, without our help, you will go through whatever you have left in a few years, and you will have nothing. You are going to need us a lot more than you realize." I looked at her. She was still for a moment, and then she said it clearly, the thing she had been circling around for months. She said, "Mom, face it, you can't manage this on your own anymore. You're going to end up with nothing." She said it gently. That was the part that took my breath away. She said it gently, like she was being kind. I stood up from the table. I said, "I appreciate your concern. I am going to take a shower. I will talk to you later." I walked upstairs. I did not run. I walked at my normal pace. I closed the bathroom door behind me and I turned on the shower and I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and I allowed myself 5 minutes to fall apart. I counted them on the clock on the wall. Then I turned the shower off and I got dressed and I drove to Frances's house and I sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything, all of it, the transfers, the deed papers, the conversation this morning. The 19 months. Frances listened without interrupting, which is a rare quality in anyone. When I was finished, she asked me one question. She said, "What do you want to happen?" I said, "I want my house back. I want my money back. And I want to be done." She said, "Then let's figure out how to do that." The next 3 weeks were quiet on the surface and very busy underneath. I went back to Thomas, the attorney. I brought my notepads, both of them, and my bank statements going back 22 months, and I explained everything. He was not visibly surprised, which told me he had heard versions of this story before. He used the words financial elder abuse, which I had known somewhere in the back of my mind, but had not said out loud yet. Hearing someone else say it made it real in a way that was both awful and clarifying. He told me my options. I could pursue civil action to recover the transferred funds. I could report to Adult Protective Services, which would open an investigation. I could change my accounts immediately, remove my daughter as authorized signer, and document everything going forward. He said I should do that last thing regardless of what else I decided. I did it that afternoon. New accounts at the quiet bank. Everything moved. Main checking. Rerouted. My daughter removed as authorized signer. I also updated my will. I had not touched it in 9 years. Thomas helped me update it, and in the updated version I made specific provisions, clear and legal and documented, that could not be moved around or contested easily. I also wrote a letter to my grandson to be held by Thomas's office to be given to him when he turned 25. I explained in the letter who I was, what I had saved, what I wanted for him. I explained what had happened, plainly without bitterness, because I thought he deserved the truth when he was old enough to understand it. I told him that I loved him, that none of this was about him, that I hoped he would grow into the kind of man who never made his grandmother feel the way I had felt. I sealed the envelope and gave it to Thomas, and I walked out into the August heat, and I sat in my car for a moment, and I breathed. I had one more conversation with my daughter. I waited until a Tuesday evening when her husband had taken my grandson to soccer practice, and she and I were alone in the kitchen. She was on her phone. I sat down at the table and I waited until she looked up. I said, "I need to tell you some things." I told her I had changed my accounts. I told her I had spoken with an attorney. I told her I had documentation of every transfer I had found and that I was deciding how to proceed. I said this without raising my voice. I had thought carefully about how I wanted to say these things, and I said them the way I planned. My daughter went very still. Then she said, "Mom, you are overreacting." I said, "I do not think I am." She said, "We were trying to help you. We were worried about you." I said, "I know you believe that." She said, "If you do this, if you make this into something legal, do you understand what that means for our family?" I said, "Yes. I have thought about it for a long time." She looked at me and I could see her trying to find the version of me she had been managing for the past 2 years. The one who folded up her notepads and put them in drawers and said nothing and made chicken and dumplings alone at the kitchen table. She was looking for that woman and she was not finding her. I said, "I need you to find another place to live. I am giving you 60 days. I want that to be enough time. If you need help with a deposit, I will help with that. But I need you to go." She left the kitchen without saying anything. 2 days later, her husband came to me and tried to have a version of the conversation where he explained things. I listened. I said very little. I said the 60 days stands. They were gone in 43. My house has been quiet since September. A different kind of quiet than before. The quiet of a place that belongs to me again. I go to book club on the second Tuesday of every month. I have dinner with Francis on Fridays. My son calls from Portland and I tell him more than I used to. And he is angry on my behalf in the way that sons are. And I let him be angry and I tell him I am all right and I mean it. I see my grandson on video calls. My daughter and I are not close right now. I do not know what we will be eventually. I think about that sometimes, not with bitterness, but with something that feels more like patience. She is my daughter. That does not change. But I am not required to pay for cruelty with silence. The attorney is still working through the financial piece. I may get some of it back. I may not get all of it. Thomas says these things take time and are never clean. I have made peace with that. The quiet account is still quiet. It is still intact. It is, in a strange way, proof of something I needed to know about myself. That even when I could not see clearly, some part of me was protecting something. My grandson will have something from me when the time comes. It will not be what I originally intended. But it will be given with intention and with love and with the full knowledge of what it cost. There's a woman in my book club. Her name is Harriet. She is 74. And she told me once that the hardest thing about getting older is that people start to look at you and see a problem to be solved rather than a person. She said the only answer she had ever found was to refuse to see yourself that way first. I have been thinking about that a lot. I did not spend 32 years on a hospital floor, helping people through the hardest moments of their lives. to spend my last decades apologizing for existing. I am still here. I am still clear. I still get up in the morning and make good coffee and sit in the chair by the window that gets the morning light and read for an hour before I do anything else. I still know exactly who I am. And if there is anything I want you to take from this, if you are somewhere in the middle of your own version of this, if you are sitting at a table eating chicken alone and telling yourself it is fine, please hear me. The part of you that has been keeping quiet record, that has been noticing, that added up the numbers and folded the notepad and kept it in the drawer. That part of you is not confused. It is not overreacting. It is not being selfish. It is protecting you. Listen to it. You do not have to disappear to keep the peace. You are not the problem. And you still have time to open the door. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the quiet way you think about things when you are sitting in your chair by the window with your coffee and the morning light is coming in and you have nowhere you have to be. What I kept coming back to was this. The moment I said yes to adding my daughter to my account, I had already started to lose something. Not the money. The money came later. I lost my own confidence in my own clarity. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was love. And some of it was. But some of it was also the beginning of a pattern I did not name in time. And patterns that go unnamed tend to grow. That is the first thing I would tell anyone who is somewhere in the early pages of a story like mine. Name what you see. Not to your family. Not yet. Just to yourself. Write it down the way I finally did on that notepad in my nightstand. There is something about putting numbers on paper. Real numbers, real dates, that cuts through all the soft explanations we give ourselves. It is not unkind to see clearly. It is necessary. The second thing I learned is about the difference between love and leverage. I loved my daughter when she was 9 years old and her father died, and I had to be both parents at once. I loved her when she struggled through her 20s, and I helped more times than I counted. That love was real, and it is still real. But love cannot be what someone uses to make you feel that asking a question is the same as being difficult. Love does not require you to stay confused. When someone uses your affection as the reason you should not look too closely at your own bank statement, that is not love operating. That is something else. Recognizing that difference is not a betrayal. It is just honest. The third thing, and this is the one that took me longest to understand, is about what I will call the quiet account of the self. Not money. Something older. I had spent decades caring for other people. My patients, my children, my late husband in his last months, and I was genuinely glad to do it. But somewhere in all of that, I had started to think of my own needs as things that could wait. As optional. As slightly embarrassing to insist on. My daughter knew that about me, whether she understood it consciously or not. It is what made her miscalculate. She assumed the woman who had always folded the notepad and put it in the drawer would keep doing that forever. She did not know about Francis. She did not know about Thomas. She did not know that I had spent 32 years watching people in crisis and learning that the ones who came through were the ones who finally said out loud to one other person, "Here is what is actually happening." I said it out loud. That was the thing that changed everything. I am 67 years old. I still have time. I have my house, my chair by the window, my book club on Tuesdays, my son's voice on the phone, a letter in a lawyer's office that my grandson will read when he is 25. I have Francis across the street and good coffee and mornings that belong entirely to me. What you protect with honesty, your clarity, your resources, your self-respect. That is what you have left to give. I want to give from something real, not from what is left after I have talked myself out of seeing what is right in front of me. You still have time, too. Whatever drawer you have been putting things in, open it.